I'm here in Bethlehem with singer-songwriter Garth Hewitt. Now, Garth, you have a huge number of albums. What got you first involved in music?
That's an interesting question. I suppose when I was at school I started to play and sing, and I got a little band together, a couple of bands. When I was at university, I got my guitar playing to the level that I had a few chords up my sleeve and used to go and play. And I was up in Durham, and so went and played at local folk clubs. But also I played at some of the Christian student organizations and so on, and started to songwrite in that situation. And then I had more and more opportunity for gigs, and played quite a lot of Christian events at this point. And I was invited to make an album. A guy called Norman Miller came up to me and said, would you do an album? It was for an organization called Hildenborough Hall, and they had a label called Breakthrough, which sadly didn't break through. But he took we'd recorded in Air London, and then went to Ian Hamilton, who was with his father running Word Records, and so that album got released, called The Lion and the Lamb. That got released on Word Records. So that's how I got into the recording side of it. Music itself, I simply had a love for, and I found that I was writing songs, and then I was invited by a man called Tim Dudley Smith to go full-time on an organization, a church organization called Church Pastoral Aid Society. Tim Dudley Smith is actually, he's a bishop, but he is, I would say, a very significant hymn writer. So he spotted me playing at an event, and so they actually salaried me to be a kind of contemporary gospel singer, which I did for quite a lot of years with them. And that's what took me to the next level, that I had the chance, absolutely unexpected. I was actually a curate in a parish, and expected I would go on eventually to be a vicar in a parish, but then I found I had a different route.
How long have you been in the music industry?
Oh, hang on a minute, that takes a bit of counting. I suppose I released my first album in 1973, and so I was recording and doing concerts from late 60s, early 70s, and then it increased much more during the mid-70s. Occasionally I've done other things and thought I'll do a little less music, but I get that sort of feeling that I'm not doing what I should be doing. It seems to be interwoven in my vocation.
So are you now classed as legendary?
You know, it's funny. I think as you get older, that word does come out a bit, whether you're legendary or not.
Now, your latest album is Against the Grain. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's an album and a book. The book is a memoir, as I think they call them memoirs these days, for autobiography. And when I was talking with the record company about doing the book, I was getting their advice, because it's called Ginger Dog, and they've also worked with books before. So I said, I'm writing the memoir, which, it's quite hard, a memoir, compared to other books. I've written other books, but the memoir is quite hard. And they said, you need to do an album with it. And the reason we were chatting was, what's the title going to be of the book? And I said, I'm wondering about Against the Grain. And they said, if you call it Against the Grain, we'll release an album. In fact, a double album it is. And so the album has new songs, quite a few that haven't been on record. Like I've recorded, I forget, maybe I recorded 4 or 5 for the album specifically, or 3 or 4. But then there's certain songs that hadn't been released on album before. One called Mar Gregorius, which is about an archbishop who has been taken hostage in the Syrian situation. So that's the first time it's made an appearance on an album. And then I found some old demos and things. And one of them astounds me in terms of what it's saying, and the relevance almost frightens me. It's so powerful. It's called "We Don't Do Body Counts," from a quote from an American general in the Iraq War. And then there's a couple of, they were kind of, at the time they would have been called country rock songs, but actually they're sort of Americana now. And I released those years back when I had a band. I didn't release them, sorry, I recorded them back when I had a band. and they're really nice sound. It was taken off a cassette, so the quality isn't huge, but the feel is rather fun. So, in other words, we've got new material, we've got some stuff from different stages of my journey, and some oddities tucked in there as well.
Do you write songs to challenge people?
Challenging people is part of art. We're sitting here in Banksy's hotel, and I was just reading an article by Banksy where he welcomes people to the hotel, and he then quotes Eleanor Roosevelt about saying that art is to comfort the, I'm going to forget it now, the disturbed, and to disturb the comfortable. And so there is, I think, in art a tremendous responsibility to comfort people, and to, I think this is where the spirituality of gospel music, I think, comes in very strongly. But it also has a side which is challenge. And you look around here, there's all these works by him, and they're challenging. They've got a real political message, but they have humor and so on. And I think in music, it has a responsibility to do the same thing. I think I've used the phrase gospel singer with one album that I did. That normally to people means almost like a musical style, but I was using it in terms of the message of the gospel I hope is reflected in my albums and in my songs. Because if so, it has to be a bit of a two-edged sword. In other words, it brings you the hope, it brings you the encouragement, but it brings you the challenge, and it says, don't do that. That's to me, the gospel is reflecting the way of Jesus. So, and the song Against the Grain is about Jesus riding into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, where Jesus defines himself in terms of coming in from the opposite side of Jerusalem, from where the war horses would have come in, where the empire came in, and Jesus is saying, no, this is the peace way, and this kingdom of God challenges all the empires. So it's Jesus defining himself as this peacemaker in a very powerful way.
Mm-hmm. Who inspires or challenges you?
In my life, I've been very fortunate that I have heard or met or seen people who are enormously significant. When I was a teenager, I went to hear Martin Luther King speak. Well, it was a life changer because I saw that Christianity, sometimes we're quite selfish with our Christianity. We recognize it makes us feel good and so on. But he was picking up that sense of your responsibility to love God, but love your neighbor, and so the social action and so on. And love yourself, but have it in the right perspective. And then I think Archbishop Desmond Tutu was a great inspiration as I saw what he was doing in South Africa. So there are certain figures that have been inspiration for many people. And then it's sometimes just been individual figures, as a Baptist pastor in Nicaragua, where the Amos Trust has worked, called Gustavo Parajon. He was a doctor. He started a relief and development agency. He was a person who made visible the spirituality of Jesus. And so he was a great inspiration. I think in the music sense, I would go back to Mahalia Jackson as a great inspiration, a woman who, with her music, was able to do something very special, and yet she was quite a prophetic figure. And she was the person who told Martin Luther King when he was doing his speech, I have a dream, he wasn't going to include those words. Yeah. And she literally yells it out to him, tell them about the dream, Martin. And so there's a tremendous figure to admire. And nowadays I admire those who speak up. I like to see people, reflecting the gospel message, but sometimes the Christian church is very reticent in speaking up on the challenge of the world around us. I mean, we're in a horrendous situation around the world at the moment. People are swinging right-wing in an extreme and fascist way. Countries are having leaders who are truly awful. We're walking backwards. So this is a moment, particularly to reflect that wonderful value of the kingdom of Jesus, and to speak up about it, and not just to be polite as the church, but to be a prophetic voice. So it's a very, very important time.
Has Christian music changed over the years?
Yes. What happened, particularly in Britain, and to some extent in America, was worship music came in, and it dominated because it sold more records. But I think what we lost was the storytelling Christian music. And that was really important. There was a very valuable time in the 70s, 80s, I think, where the storytellers were strong. I think for people who want to pick up justice issues like myself, there's always been a mixed reaction. In the States, a good friend of mine is called Ken Miedema, amazing writer, and he was thrown off his label in the States with the words, "Justice doesn't sell." And I think, yep, that's the whole point. Profits don't sell. But it speaks the truth, and it's helpful for people, therefore. And I feel there was something valuable about that time when there were the storytellers. I don't know what Christian music is doing so much these days. I haven't heard so much in the States, and I'm sure there are people doing good things. But I'd like to see the same happen in the UK. And I'd like to see it, though, not just entertaining people, though that's valuable in it, but to go further, I'd like to see it have a spirituality that is refreshing and helpful for people, and also to have a commitment to issues of justice, which I think reflects the whole heart of the way of Jesus.
Now, we're here in Bethlehem, and you have a couple of albums, Bethlehem Speaks and Bethlehem Hidden from View. Why did you write these albums?
The album, for a minute here I'm pausing because I was just thinking, Bethlehem Speaks, I think, was a book. I think, I'm not even sure I can remember. I did a thing, I decided through, with the Amos Trust at one stage, we were particularly trying to focus people's attention on what was happening over here with Palestine and Israel. But Bethlehem's a very significant place for the Christian community. And most people don't really know anything about it. It's classic. Someone the other day said, "I didn't know Bethlehem existed." They think it's like a Disney thing. You sing about it at Christmas. And so I wanted the story to be told. So Bethlehem Speaks, actually, is an interview with 16 different people from Bethlehem about the current situation of the occupation. And then I did a film called Bethlehem Hidden from View, because I found when I was talking in concerts and I would talk about the huge, ugly separation wall, 87% of Bethlehem's land has been taken by the Israelis. So there's a tiny little town now that is Bethlehem. And I thought, but when I talk about the wall, I could see people looking a bit bewildered. There's a huge wall, is there? And so I thought, I'll make a film. And so with Jewish and Christian friends, I interviewed them and made Bethlehem Hidden from View. And it got a lot of plays in churches. It got a lot of play. It got some very interesting plays, actually. On Muslim TV played it. A film festival in Malaysia, a Muslim festival, played it. So it did almost more than I expected. But then I wrote one called Bethlehem Palestine. The album was Bethlehem Palestine. And that was because, again, I wanted to stress to people. I've asked people here, like who come in coaches and so on, they get coached in. They're not told where they are. I said, "Where are you?" "We're in Bethlehem. Bethlehem in Israel." So it's not in Israel. It's in Palestine. And they're bewildered. And so I thought, we've got to say where places are. So I did 2 albums. One was Bethlehem Palestine. One was Gaza Palestine. And of course, in the current situation, well, I suppose I better do one Jerusalem Palestine. But the Bethlehem one was really basically a storytelling. And I wrote some special albums, special songs for it. And that one did very well. People are very interested in the Holy Land. They're interested what's being said about Bethlehem. And you're right. There is a song on there called Bethlehem Hidden from View. You're right. I'd forgotten there was a song as well. Yeah. You know better than me.
So is Bethlehem close to your heart?
Yes, very much. And the places around here, the communities, places like Beit Sahur, the Shepherd's Field area and so on, I have a lot of friends. And I suppose this is the place I've written most about, both in songs and in books. I've put together a double album, and it's called Songs from the Fifth Gospel. I can see people, they look a little strangely at me. He's written a fifth gospel. But it's actually picking up the words of St. Jerome, who lived here in Bethlehem in about the 4th century. And he talked about the Holy Land being the fifth gospel, casting like a light on the other gospels. And I like to say, and the communities of the Holy Land as well. That's very important, the people here, to listen to them. And that kind of opens up a fifth gospel, the story of the fifth gospel. So I put together all the songs that I'd written that related to the situation. Wissam Salsa, the director of the Waldorf Hotel, Banksy's Hotel, asked me if I would put together the songs I'd written. And I thought, okay, we'll do that. We'll do a CD. But it turned out then, because I'd written so many songs on the situation here, and I thought also to include songs that would be suitable for people who were on a pilgrimage. I put them together on it became a double album.
Christians have left Bethlehem. What is your message to those who have stayed?
The situation for the Palestinians has never been worse. It's a frightening thing. Last year, with the Amos Trust, people walked all the way from London to Palestine, and we ended in St. George's Anglican Cathedral in Jerusalem because we were apologizing for the Balfour Declaration. So the Balfour Declaration talked of giving a homeland to the Jewish people, but it said it wouldn't upset the non-Jewish communities that were here. Well, obviously that part has been ignored. So the suffering of the Palestinians has been terrible. And the Christian community is almost unrecognized out by the Christian community around the world, even though there are such names as Jerusalem and Bethlehem and so on. But so it seemed to me it's been very important to tell that story and to come here regularly so that they sense that there is support coming from around the world, and to bring groups here. We've brought many groups, just so they walk on the ground. They see the holy sites, but they also, let's call them the holy old stones in some cases, but they've also met living stones, the community, which could be, I'd use that term widely in terms of, say, the Christian churches, also the Jewish and Muslim peacemakers, because people don't get their stories either. So that way, there's a much more rounded picture than you get through the media, really. And what would I say to the people who are here in Bethlehem? Well, I would like to say one of the ways you inspire me is the way you've stayed here, witnessing to the world for centuries. It's a lot to ask of people when the Israelis are using such a brutal occupation. But I would certainly say we'd like to maintain our friendship and support for them and campaign to change our government's minds. I mean, the British government has caused a huge problem. Last year, Theresa May said, "I'm proud of the Balfour Declaration." Well, Palestinians were furious. This caused a Nakba for them, a catastrophe, as that word means. Why didn't she say something about the catastrophe that was done to the Palestinians and do something about it? It'd be easy to do. It's not the hardest thing in the world. So politicians have failed, and that's very sad. But the people who I think haven't failed are those people you meet here in Bethlehem and obviously other parts of the West Bank and Gaza, but who we find people who are committed to non-violence, committed to creative resistance, created to show that there's a better way forward. And for those people, I just want to say thank you. You're showing the world that there is a better way to deal with things. It isn't just violence and guns.
Do you see a lot of potential here in Bethlehem?
Yes. Bethlehem is a place that a little event happened here once with a baby being born, transformed the world, or large sections of the world. And I believe the witness of non-violence that comes out of Bethlehem, the witness of creative resistance that comes out of Bethlehem, all of that is a message to the world. But they need support because the pressure's so strong. But they keep living out these values, which is easy for us perhaps not even to think about, because we think we're not pressurized with occupation and issues that are so everyday in our lives. But I'm afraid I feel the world is changing. We may well find these kind of things ourselves. But Bethlehem has stood firm and shown good news for the poor and oppressed and forgotten, Bethlehem is a place of hope.
Now, you're a founder of the Amos Trust. Tell us a little bit about that.
It started almost by accident, which was to support. I was touring a lot, and I used to get invited, and supposing it was to Canada or somewhere, they would say to me, yeah, we'll pay you your airfare and everything and look after you and pay you a fee so you've got a salary. Then people would ask, would you come to our place, where things are very difficult for one reason or another, and no, we can't afford to pay. And it seemed to me it's wrong to say no just because they haven't got money. If there's a ministry, then it's worth going. And so at that time I was with St Saviour's Church in Guildford, and we formed a trust, and we started to raise money. The first place I went to was Poland. That was it was still in the old communist regime. So, and then down into a huge slum area in Kenya was the second trip, in the Mathare Valley. So we were going to people who were asking for their story to be told, for me to come, see things, tell the story. And the wonderful thing was people rallied around and said, okay, we'll give to that, yeah. Then I'd come back, and then we decided not just to tell the story, but to create an ongoing link with places. And so we'd support certain projects. And that was a very important moment, and Amos has blossomed with that. So we're supporting projects here in Bethlehem, and particularly we're saying we've learnt from our partners. They've shown us things, how to live, and so we also in turn want to be supportive and see if we, through bringing people through to see the situation, they can be inspired, and by continuing to tell the stories and so on. So Amos has developed in that way. It was called Amos because there's only one place in the Bible where music is criticized, and that's in Amos. And it's criticized if you ignore the poor. It's quite interesting, actually. It's worth reading the passage in Amos 5. It's a little hard to know, are they talking just about music, or is it actually music in worship, which is quite striking. And if you're doing that and ignoring the poor, God does not accept that. So it's a challenge to me that I thought I must never forget. So we'll call it Amos Trust. I must never forget that that's the challenge to the music community.
Why did you actually start the organisation? What was the real root behind it?
Well, that was very practical. The first bit was practicality of doing the gigs in other parts of the world and continuing the storytelling. And I do think there was that change of, it went deeper as we said, no, we'll keep the relationships. It's a very relationship-based organisation. And we will also remember the prophetic edge of the Christian message, and that there have to be things that help the church in that search for a commitment to what Christian mission is, particularly in terms, there are what's called the 4 marks of mission that a lot of churches subscribe to, and certainly the Anglican Church does. The 4th one is about dealing with systemic injustice and a commitment to non-violence and peacemaking. Quite a hard one. A lot of churches who are very good in practical ways of loving your neighbour and so on, don't quite know what to do with that one. So Amos is there to help people pick up some of those issues and find a way forward on that issue. Incidentally, the 5th mark mission is all about climate change and looking after God's world, which is about to become, I suppose, the biggest issue of all at the moment. We're tumbling on the edge of that.
Do you get to hear some amazing stories around the world with the Amos Trust?
Yes, but amazing in terms of people who are working, giving their lives with courage, people who are making visible the gospel in a way that means rolling up your sleeves. I wrote a song, God with Sleeves Rolled Up, because I think they recognize that it's in loving your neighbor that you make visible the character of God. And so we meet people who we find, we feel very humbled because they have done things that we haven't done, and that we would like to pass on that story to other people. So that's why through books and music and so on, and a little bit of film, we've tried to pass that on. Hope is a very interesting question for not just the Christian community, everyone at the moment, but certainly Christians ask me, do you see hope? Well, very hard to see hope in a lot of situations. Why would the Palestinians be hopeful? I mean, they have one of the most powerful armies in the world shooting them with bullets that expand when they hit you. You've got 20,000 people injured in Gaza from these shootings on the border. Why would there be any hope out of Gaza? Under siege, profoundly immoral situation. And then you find people who are writing poems. They're doing paintings. They haven't lost their commitment to a better world. They haven't lost their commitment to non-violence. The poet who inspired the March of Return says, I wanted to do what Martin Luther King did and what Mahatma Gandhi did. Wow, and they're walking right into the bullets. It's stunning, but it's an example to the world that when you think hope is over, keep an eye open, because there are people who say, we will resist creatively, non-violence, and we have spiritual values that say something about a God who loves equally. And never get caught up in this thing where you say God likes one lot better than another, because the result of it is a situation like this. God loves equally, absolutely equally. So my next meeting this morning is with a Jewish rabbi who's absolutely committed to peace for the Palestinians. That gives me hope. That's where the hope lies.
Are you making a difference?
I really hope so. And if I can trust the words of our supporters in Amos Trust, they are saying thank you for the difference we've made. The reason I'm out here this time is they wanted to do a very, what they call an honouring, because I've been continually speaking up for the Palestinian situation. It's deeply moving for me, very kind of them to do it. But as I looked at the people in the room, I thought, you're the people who have inspired us. We learn from you. And okay, they're thanking me. I'm grateful to be a little part of the story, but they have to do it day by day by day. And so this is something that's we must never forget, so that we too witness to these things day by day.
What's your prayer finally for Bethlehem?
The Prince of Peace was born in Bethlehem. I would like the prayer to be one that peace will come with justice. You can't get to peace without justice and the beautiful character of a generous and loving God. I'd like to see that brought as a reality here. And that will mean some repentance. In other words, Israel taken that 87% of the land and so on. Don't do that. There's a better way. There's a better way where people can love their neighbour as their self, it's there in the Jewish scriptures as we pick it up as Christians. And so my prayer would be, let's live out the values of the Prince of Peace. Let's draw on the reminder to love God and to love our neighbour as ourselves. Let's bring some hope and healing. Let's make sure that religion doesn't divide, violence doesn't divide. Let's make sure that we, whatever the cost, are committed to the way of a God whose generosity, whose mercy, the God whose name is Mercy was a book that Pope Francis wrote. I like that. I think there'll be a song with that title. We really need to discover the character of God, the mercy, the generosity, the love, and live that way. And my prayer would be for Bethlehem, who have witnessed to this through 2,000 years, to keep witnessing and keep let that be a visible reality in our time.
Okay, Garth, thank you very much.
Real pleasure to talk to you, Paul. Thank you.